This Choircast podcast is brought to you by Snarky Faith. Snarky Faith is a place where we dive headfirst in the tumultuous crossroad of life, culture, and politics in Christendom today. Fed up with the insanity in Christianity? Well, you'll feel right at home here. I'm Stuart Deloney, and Snarky Faith is more than just a critique. Join me as we wrestle, question, and explore the dialogue that shapes our faith in the world today. So look for Snarky Faith wherever you listen to podcasts.
Lord have mercy. The Lord is my shepherd. He knows what I want.
Western Christianity has spent the last 2,000 years telling everyone they're separated from God.
This is Not Church with John and Nat Turney and Bethany Shea.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. My name is Nat. I'm with my brother, John. As always, say hi, John.
Hi, John.
And this is the podcast we lovingly dubbed This Is Not Church. Because if it was church, you would be gone. You'd have left. And John and I wouldn't blame you one tiny bit. But we may feel like we're having church today, though. I tell you what, John and I have been privileged over the years, and we've been doing this 5+ years now. And first of all, kudos to us, and pat myself and strain my own arm, pat myself on the back that we're doing this. But man, we've just been fortunate to have some of the best people on to talk. Today is probably the top of the top, the creme de la creme. I like having John Dominic Crossan on, first of all, because I can flatter him, and he takes it. So
he believes it.
He believes it because it's true. He is. Let me introduce Dom, and I'm also going to introduce the co-author of a new book coming out. And let me tell you about John real quick. He's a generally acknowledged to be the premier historical Jesus scholar in the world. And that's no joke. That's no small feat, by the way, Dom. That's his books include The Historical Jesus, A Revolutionary Biography, and Who Killed Jesus, among many, many, many others. He recently appeared in the PBS special From Jesus to Christ, and his latest book is called Jesus and Justice, Organizing for God's Reign on Earth Then and Now, which is co-authored by Michael Okinczyc-Cruz, the executive director and co-founder of the Coalition for Spiritual and Public Leadership. It's a faith-rooted community. He's a faith-rooted community organizer who has worked alongside faith communities and thousands of grassroots leaders to address poverty, violence, and systemic inequities. He's an adjunct professor, associate professor at the Institute of Pastoral Studies at Loyola University Chicago, and is the co-author of the book that we're here to discuss today. Let's just start with you, Michael, if you don't mind, since I know we only have you for a short time. Give us a little bit of your background, if you wouldn't mind, before we jump into talking about this new book.
Absolutely, Nat. And John, it's great to be with you both. Thank you for having Dom and I with you today. A little bit about my background. I'm originally from Southern California, born in San Isidro, specifically a part of Southern California called San Isidro, right along the border of Mexico in Tijuana and San Diego. Grew up in a family in which faith and church was very important to us, but I never thought that my life would be so entangled and immersed in faith-based communities. I have been now in the field of faith-based community organizing work for about 15 years, going on 16 years. I think what really motivated me to get into this work was the housing collapse in 2007, 2008. This was around the time that I was graduating from college as an undergrad. And I just entered into the job market and said, gosh, this is a disaster. And not only was my family impacted, but certainly millions of other Americans were deeply impacted by the housing collapse, and really caused by greed and corruption and economic exploitation. And so I decided I was going to pursue a vocation, a field of work that allowed for me to work with others to, work for economic justice and to work with local communities that could move from a place of feeling powerless to a place of feeling like we have collective agency and that we could exercise our collective power together. So I found community organizing. And I've been working with churches and various faith communities over the last 15 years, working on a myriad of issues related to immigration justice, economic justice, justice in terms of criminal justice reform, and a whole myriad of things. And it's been a blessing in my life. And through that work, I encountered Dom's writings years ago. And the very first book that I read from Dom's long list of works was Jesus, a Revolutionary Biography. This would have been right around 2013, I want to say. And I finally had the chance to meet Dom in 2024. He came to Chicago to speak at the annual Congress for the organization that I direct today, the Coalition for Spiritual and Public Leadership. My colleague Joanna got in touch with Dom, and he joined us for a 3-day Congress in Chicago, and it was phenomenal. And it was from that experience that Dom and I began discerning this idea of writing this book together, Jesus and Justice. And I'm very grateful for that experience that we had together.
That's awesome. I'm really, it's amazing that you connected, although Dom seems to be fairly easy to connect with. He's one of the most impressive guys I've met who's I'm impressed by the fact that he's reachable and is so active on all these different platforms. But I think the first book I read was The Historical Jesus. And it was a textbook in the class I took in a summer session my senior year of college. And I've told Dom the story once or twice, but I really didn't like him very much because I was a 23 or 24-year-old know-it-all evangelical. And who the hell was this guy, this ex-Catholic priest, talking to me about. Anyway, it took a long time for those words to take root. They did eventually. And now I looking back, I think sometimes you can't see those watershed moments until you're looking back on them and go, oh, that was the first little crack in the dam of certainty that maybe some of the mythology I'd grown up believing about Jesus. So let me ask you about this. When you read Jesus, Revolutionary Biography, where were you at religiously? Did that rock you a little bit, or did you find maybe a kindred spirit in Dom?
That's a great question. I think where I was in my 20s, my mid-20s around that time. I had grown up Catholic early on in life. I've returned to the Catholic Church, but grew up Catholic. Being Mexican and Polish, it's inescapable, growing up Catholic. But then my mother, right around the time I was 9 or 10, took us to a local Salvation Army church. And that's where we grew up from the age of 9 to 10 till about 18 when I went off to college. That was my faith experience. And, say what you will about the Salvation Army. I think one thing that what we experienced early on was that to be a person of faith, to be a Christian, meant that you had to serve, that you had to be committed to the well-being of others. And so that was something that my mother modeled deeply for my brothers and I, and that we saw around us constantly. But theologically, there was not much that I could walk away with in terms of having a deep and robust theology that I could say was my own or that I really had embraced as a young adult. It wasn't until after college that I encountered a number of works, Walter Rauschenbusch, Christianity and the Social Crisis, Dr. King's works, The Strength to Love. I started engaging with Catholic social teaching. And so I had begun to really expand my thinking as a Christian in the world, really begun to just scratch the surface of developing a deeper curiosity in terms of exploring these different social dimensions of Christianity. And so when I encountered Dom's work, it was a mentor of mine, an organizing mentor of mine who had been reading Dom for many years, who said, you would enjoy reading John Dominic Crossan. And the first book he recommended was Jesus, a Revolutionary Biography. And it just opened up an entirely new world for me in terms of understanding who Jesus was, particularly within the first century context, living under Roman occupation and all that entailed, and how that brought to light Jesus' teachings and his actions in such a profoundly important way for me. And being a community organizer, I felt so drawn to this work because not only was Dom talking so vividly about through this book the conditions that Jesus faced and that Jesus' people faced. But in so many ways, I could draw parallels between the social, political, economic conditions that so many people today in our modern context face. We no longer have the Roman Empire, but we have empires of a different sort. And, oppression, is always there. And those who oppress and the institutions that oppress just find different ways to describe it or to do it. But many of the patterns are consistently the same. And so it was a really important moment in my life in which I encountered Dom's works, and I'm deeply grateful for it. So that first book, Jesus, a Revolutionary Biography, led me to several others of his that I've read over the year. The Last Week is another one of my favorites. And we use that a lot in our work with the Coalition for Spiritual and Public Leadership, CSPL, and the theological formation work that we do with our members. Really helping our members reflect on the significance of Holy Week and Easter and what this meant for Jesus during that time and what this means for us now in our present moment.
Well, that was co-authored with Marcus Borg, if I remember correctly, right, Tom?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wish I'd had a chance to meet Marcus. He always seemed like an amazing guy. But we got Dom, so we can live vicariously through his experience, hanging out with him in the Jesus Seminar and all those heretics that you trod some ground with back in the day. I love that intersection though of Jesus as, and I'll use the parlance of my political interlocutors, the woke social justice warrior Jesus, which quite frankly I'm tired of the word woke because it just has become this stupid amorphous pejorative thrown at anybody who cares, who deigns to care about the stuff that Jesus seemed to care about, which is justice and making sure that the vulnerable are not trampled under the wheels of the chariots of empire. So one thing that has drawn me, I'm not a churchgoer anymore. If I was, I would probably find myself in one of the Catholic traditions, first of all, because I think they do share a devotion to that kind of work. I have several friends in the Salvation Army Church, and I love them dearly for their devotion to service and to helping others. But I could see myself as a Franciscan, maybe. I don't think I couldn't do the mainstream thing. But that intersection, though, of social justice that the Catholic Church has over the years been, I think, fairly formative in, is such an important thing. As a what's the word I would say, a recovering evangelical, that has been the hardest part to reconcile because so much of my faith was so individualized. It was pretty much work out your own salvation with fear and trembling, Nat, and don't so much worry about righting the wrongs of the world. So, do you see your work as a community organizer following in the footsteps then of would you see Jesus almost as an archetypal, community organizer, helping people to shoulder the burden of living under oppression of an empire?
Well, I think in so many ways there are parallels. Certainly that term I don't think existed back then. Maybe,
no, for sure.
Maybe I'm wrong and we just didn't catch it, but or it was never written down. But many of the things that guide organizing in terms of philosophical, moral, spiritual commitments really begin with relationships. It begins with the recognition that every person has the capacity to exercise agency, that every person has a voice. And in organizing, we have a preferential option for the poor, just as they say in the Catholic social teaching tradition, in which we believe that the people who are closest to the pain, to the suffering, to the experience of marginalization, that they, within their own experience of suffering and oppression and marginalization, understand not only intimately social injustice, violence, poverty, and all that comes with those realities, but they also conversely understand many of the solutions that we need to pursue societally. And, one thing that we see in Jesus's ministry is that this reign of God movement that Jesus initiated, it included many, many, many oppressed peoples during Jesus's lifetime, that Jesus believed in in a theology of collaboration. And by that we mean Jesus invited people into this movement to play an active and participatory role in the unfolding vision of God's reign on earth. And that was profoundly radical. We talk about in the book the difference, this distinctive difference between John the Baptist and his vision and Jesus's reign of God vision. One is more passive, the other is much more participatory, and that it invites the protagonism of the people that Jesus is with, women, people who fish for a living, fishermen, that they were intimately involved in this movement and playing a role in this movement, whereas John the Baptist's vision was really revolved around awaiting God's intervention in the world. And Jesus believed the reign is here. It is here and now, and we have to believe in it, but also work to manifest it more fully. And the work of organizing, in terms of building a more just, fair, participatory democracy, requires the participation of everyday people. We certainly don't believe that billionaires should determine the state of our politics and the quality of the life that we're meant to enjoy, but that everybody, especially the most marginalized and oppressed, have a say in the decisions that are being made that determine the quality of life that they're able to live. And so in that sense of believing the capacity of every person to do good, to exercise agency, to build collective power together that we exercise in society responsibly, and to work for the common good, but to have a deep sense of what the common good should reflect in the current context. That is a deep belief in the capacity of people to manifest God's love on earth. And that gift is not a gift that only a few should be able to exercise and be entrusted to do, but that's a gift that everybody, especially the most marginalized, are fully capable of exercising. And that is really core to Jesus's vision in life. The other is Jesus's real bold and profound commitment to nonviolence and nonviolent resistance in particular, confronting imperial oppression, and ultimately in Jesus's case, being executed for his prophetic, bold, nonviolent demonstrations. In order to truly confront the systems of oppression that dominate our world today, we have to confront them boldly and nonviolently and directly. And Jesus's life models that so beautifully for us. And we tried to communicate that clearly, soberly in this book, because Jesus's crucifixion has in so many ways been sanitized, and the truly brutal nature of it has been so diminished in our public imagination when it comes to Jesus's crucifixion. It was an execution by the Roman Empire, very publicly, very intentionally, to instill fear and terror in Jesus's followers. And despite that, they continued believing in this vision of the reign of God on earth. And many other Christians were crucified because of it. But there's, in terms of the vision of the reign of God as being a vision that communicated clearly an antithetical message to that of the Roman Empire, I think Christians in the world today must be committed to this beautiful vision of the reign of God, because it is in such deep and profound contrast to the dominant ethos, the dominant forces of our world today, which are so deeply rooted in capitalism, militarism, nationalism. This is so opposite to Jesus's vision for a world governed by God's will for all people to live with abundance and with sufficient food and opportunities to live a good and decent life, to live a life rooted in Jesus' vision for human flourishing and human dignity.
And it's, I feel like American Christians in particular, we're uniquely positioned to juxtapose that. I can see parallels with us and the early Christians in the Roman Empire, except we're members of the oppressive empire. And so we have the added burden of saying, well, now I'd only have to contend with the powers and the principalities, but they happen to be my neighbors. And, sometimes our parents and sometimes, our own elected officials. And so it's easy, I think, to get swept under. John and I were inculcated from the time we were kids into the myth of American exceptionalism, and that hand in hand with that went this other myth of America as a Christian nation, and therefore our manifest destiny to take our place in the world. And I tell you what, it takes a determined amount of effort to undo all of that. A large part of my deconstruction process when I did deconstruct my faith was, okay, I first have to unravel all of the machinations of being an American Christian, and you don't get rid of it all ever, but just try to unwind it some and begin to see the world through a different set of eyes and say, okay, my experience is not the experience of most people. It's not the experience of many people outside of this country, but we do have the power, I think, collectively to do something about it. I wonder if Jesus's commitment to nonviolence in the early churches was as much a matter of an ethos as it was a matter of practicality. I mean, what are you actually going to do against Rome? You have to get creative when it comes to resisting the mightiest empire on planet Earth. You have to. You can take up arms if you want to, but that's only gonna take you so far. So, I think oftentimes of like the civil rights movement. And
yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, well, we see that also with Martin Luther King Jr., right?
Yeah, I mean
his stands with nonviolence against an empire that could crush them.
Yeah, and often did and tried. I mean,
right.
There's not a question there. I'm just agreeing with you. It's just us saying, yeah, we get it. There's a lot of work to do. So in your book, then, I'm guessing that you will discuss this intersection then of violence, poverty, oppression, all these things that create these systems of inequity, right? Is that sort of what we're tackling here?
Absolutely. The Roman Empire went about their business in such a ruthless fashion. They conquered through violence. They dominated politically through ruthless oppression and violence. They collaborated with the religious hierarchy in order to go ahead, Dom, please.
No, I was just going to say, Caiaphas. Let me think. I get the dates. Pilate was in for 10 years, from 26 to 36. Caiaphas was in for 18 years. He was the longest reigning high priest. At the end of it, in 36, Vitellius, the legate in Syria, fired the two of them. So, I mean, even from the Roman point of view, they had collaborated not wisely, but too well. So whenever you get this combination of religion and politics in a tango, you have a recipe for disaster. You don't have to demonize Caiaphas. He's just a collaborator, a quisling, if you want. That's his job. But even for the Romans, and that's a bit too much.
Right. But when they had a common enemy, then I can't remember the verse in the Bible, but it talks about on that day, they became friends because they had a common scapegoat, someone they needed to blame for everything.
Yeah, that's the Luke story. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've seen that my whole life. I'm a child of the 80s, born in the 70s, but didn't really wake up to the 80s. But so I was around for the moral majority, for the, for all of the beginning of the marriage bed of politics and religion in here anyway. It's weird to hear or read Billy Graham had a lot to say about this early on, that he hoped it never happened. And then he saw himself smack dab in the middle of it as a counselor or advisor to many presidents. But we watched it all happen. I've lived through the whole 7 churches or 7 mountains dominion kind of thing, where we're all supposed to go take over all these pillars of government. But anyway, it's an interesting juxtaposition. So, Dom, now that we've let Michael dominate the whole first half of the conversation, and there's really clearly nothing left to say.
He's on the road, so he should have gone first.
Oh, I'm glad we got a chance to talk to him. I actually wasn't expecting it, so that was a very nice surprise. Thanks for sharing it with us. That was awesome. But now I'd like to hear from you. Give John and I a little bit of rundown of this book. I'm really interested.
Yeah, the basic thing and most important is this book is doing theology based on history. Now, you can do theology based on philosophy, on all sorts of stuff. You can also make it all up, of course.
Sure.
And doing theology without history, for me, is like playing basketball without a hoop.
Yeah.
And as long as there's no hoop, we're all magnificent.
Yeah, for sure.
Tennis without a net. Wow, my service is great. So history is a constraint. So, for example, starting with organizing. If you look at Galilee, now, historically, let's imagine Jesus doesn't exist. Good old Antipas is running Galilee. He's trying to make it. He's got an autocracy over there in Rome. So, Augustus dies in 14 CE. I'm not battering you with dates. Just watch what's going on. He dies in 14. Now, I'm Antipas, and I'm thinking, ooh, wow, Daddy was king of the Jews. Boy, I'd like to be king of the Jews. I'm stuck up here in the back of beyond. Two little pieces of land are not even united together, either side of the Jordan, and I'm a tetrarch. Tetrarch's a quarter monarch. You know, it's a non-monarch.
Right.
So how do I make it like Daddy? I gotta really up my tax base. That's the only way the Romans are interested in you. If I up my tax base and squeeze my peasants, they'll rebel, and then I'll be an ex-tetrarch by evening. I got it. Here's the great intuition. Now I'm interpreting what Antipas did. I'm not reading his mind. He decided in 14 to change his capital from inland Sepphoris to Tiberias on the lake. Changing the name to Tiberias, that's just what you expect. New emperor, new name, sure. Build a nice little arch, People do that when they want to impress somebody. Build an arch. He could have built an arch called it Tiberias. He could have done that. Why? Now, this is a question, and it's a real question. And if any historian, archaeologist doesn't ask it, push him. Why would he change his capital? You don't do that because, excuse my Aramaic, it pisses everyone off.
Right.
You want to get everyone really mad at you, shift your capital. If I'm a high aristocrat in this court, what am I going to do with a used villa at Cyprus? Who wants it? And if I'm even a poor little village scribe who comes in every day and I could do my little, things 20 miles away. I can't commute. Everyone's mad at him. And that's the evidence, by the way. So what's he up to? You don't do it without a reason unless he's an idiot. And he's not an idiot because he ruled for over 40 years. Okay. He's going to commercialize the lake. That's the only understanding I can make. It's an interpretation. Nobody says it. But you still have to figure, why does he change his capital? And why to the lake? Calls it Tiberias, find that. And all of a sudden, the Sea of Galilee becomes the Lake of Tiberias. Oh, so it's no longer a commons for Galilee. Like, the commons in Boston and all of that. But you could put the animal. So open fishing is over. You want to fish, of course, taxes. You want a boat, taxes. You want to sell your catch to my factories, to my fish factories, and I'll take my fish, raw fish, salted fish, garum fish sauce, not for sale in Galilee. I'll take it right to Tyre into the Mediterranean and Roman globalization. That's what the Roman Empire is about. It's not just gathering all these little places so he has a nice round donut around the Mediterranean. He's running globalization, and you get with the system. That's how I'll make it. I'll up my tax base. I'll have all this fish, and then, of course, I'll make it and become king of the Jews. Now, he never makes it, but that's a separate issue. Meanwhile, you watch the geography. Antipas moves from 7 o'clock to 2 o'clock across Galilee. What does Jesus do? From Nazareth to Capernaum, 7 o'clock, 2 o'clock. They're both on the lake. What's Jesus doing over there? Why is Martin Luther King on the bridge? Well, maybe he likes the view. No. Jesus ain't over there because there's a nice breeze on the seashore. Actually, there's a lot of mosquitoes, so there's a lot of sickness on the seashore. We'll leave that out for the moment. So what you're seeing is he's counter-organizing. I'm not just using that word because of Michael. That's what he's doing. He's got traction. He's saying something that these people have been hearing for 500 years. The reign of God is coming. Oh, yeah. We've heard all this. Where's the traction, though? Now, we know about traction. We know about Me Too and Black Lives Matter. Mm-hmm. An incident, a single incident, can be a revelation of what's going on. It's like all of a sudden, ordinary people, and not the poorest of the poor, people who maybe a couple of families had a boat, and they didn't do anything wrong. They didn't do anything. And all of a sudden, they can't get fish for their family. And they did nothing. Now, how did that happen? We thought that the way it was God's will. Now there's this guy, Jesus, who's talking about the reign of God, and it ain't up in the air anymore. It's right down here on the seashore. It's about who owns the fishes. Are we listening? Oh, yes, we're listening. So the reason why all the first people are fishers is not just because, what you'd expect according to the tradition is Jesus should go and gather peasants. That's what everyone does. Even, I've forgotten, there was one president here who was taken from the farm. He was the one who was assassinated. The name is gone, sorry. But, Jesus goes to the wrong place according to tradition, to the lake for fishers, not to the farm for peasants. What's he up to? So all of these are valid questions. They are not reading the mind of Antipas or Jesus. They're saying, what are they doing? Why is Jesus not staying at Nazareth, sending out the 12, go out, bring everyone to me, we'll have a nice big healing shop here. You bring all the patients to me, and everyone will love us, and the Nazarenes will adore me because I'm good for business. It'd be like Lourdes or some place like that. I'm not cracking him, just saying that's what he could have done. Why is he over by the lake? So that's like our first whole part of the book. Jesus is organizing, but he's getting traction. Traction, because tradition without traction is kind of lame. And traction without tradition is blind. You want the two of them to get going. Now, once you get going, of course, who knows what can happen. You can domesticate the whole program and, you're just more of the trouble. But that's the whole first part of the book. It's the Galilean experience of tradition and traction. And that's, of course, what a good organizer is doing. Like Michael, for example, he didn't get to talk about it, but what he's been working at is ICE agents on the streets of Chicago and insisting that those people who are in their prisons, if I can put it bluntly, ICE prisons in Chicago, have a right to spiritual counsel. They forced it. They got it. If necessary, they would have marched down there in robes, nuns in their robes, maybe take back robes they hadn't worn for a few years. So he has attraction. He was in Rome maybe a month ago. It was in May, actually, and met the Pope to talk about this. This is traction. And the Pope, of course, is from Chicago, so he knows what he's talking about.
Yeah.
But he also knows about this. Michael's group is not a group of people. It's a group of groups. It's a coalition. That was what impressed me tremendously. It was all these groups that were in there. Each had their own group. And so, traction. So that's really the first part of the book. Understanding Jesus. Good history, by the way. No cheating. It's not that, oh, he's God and he says, come with me. And there's, ooh. No, some people said, no way. I'm getting a job in the fish factories.
Right.
Yeah, of course. There was good jobs in the fish factories. Of course. It's a bit like, Walmart moving in and all this stuff. Small places closed down. But that's the first part. Now, the second whole part then is what gets Jesus out of Galilee? And these are historical questions, by the way. And I answer them historically, again, not by reading the mind of Jesus, but by saying, okay, Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Did he go every year? Well, if he went every year, which I don't think a poor day laborer was able to do, take a couple of weeks off, and he'd have to have cash. You can't take your sacrificial lamb over your shoulders all the way from, it'll be a very dead lamb by the time you get to in the middle of. Right. Anyway, so my historical interpretation, this is going swiftly, is that the supporters in Jerusalem invited Jesus. Let me just make it dramatic. They said, why don't you get out of those hick towns up in Galilee and come where the action is? Come to your capital. Come to your capital at Passover when there's Jews from all over the world. And we can protect you. Now, how do I know that? Because they did. Read Mark's gospel. You'll see it in the last week. The crowd protects him every day in the temple. The authorities want to move about him, but the crowd protect him. So he's safe during the day in the temple. Okay, now how about night? There's the full moon and Passover, but in dark streets, people disappear. How is he going to be safe at night? Every night he gets out and goes to Bethany, 2 miles away. Out of the temple, down through the valley, around the Mount of Olives, to Bethany, where he probably has friends and maybe relatives. This tells me that in no way does Jesus go up to Jerusalem to get himself killed. He is not going up to get himself killed. Of course, he knows the danger. So did Martin Luther King. And very often he talked to his friends, no, I don't want to die there. That doesn't mean you want to get yourself killed. It really doesn't. It does mean you accept that if they really come after you, you may have to die because you won't use violence. Not even to protect yourself. So Jesus goes up and he gets away with it. He gets away with a demonstration on what we call Sunday. Going into Jerusalem on a donkey, he's lampooning Pilate coming in on
a horse. Yeah.
I mean, it's dangerous stuff. It's, it's
reckless.
You'd say he's looking to get killed. No, because he gets away with it. He's not dead by Sunday night. He comes out to Bethany, of course, back in the morning. And the second day, the temple. Moving against the injustice outside the temple and using the temple as an escape, according to Jeremiah. Both of these have layers of prophetic enactment behind them, and they're like reenacting their history. And he's not dead by Monday night. Now, by Thursday night, exactly what you would expect. Caiaphas, good old Caiaphas, has figured out, can't touch him by day in the temple, too dangerous. Might cause a riot. All these people in a compressed space. There's riots, 2 riots that we know of in the first century during Passover, because they're celebrating freedom from Egypt, when they're under the Romans. Explosive. Zero toleration. So, all right. Caiaphas. He leaves the temple. He gets to Bethany. 2 places he's safe. What if I got him right in the middle? Gethsemane. That's why Jesus is in Gethsemane. He's on his way through. Gethsemane is where you have to go around, make your decision to go around the Mount of Olives to Bethany by the north road or the south road. If I'm Caiaphas, give me a couple of days. My spies and my soldiers will tell me what's going on. I know where to get him, and I get him in the dark. Of course. That's the big thing that was wrong with the Passion of the Christ. If all the Jews were against him, you don't have to grab him in the dark. Just right. Grab him in the temple. You grab him at the first time he gets off the donkey, as it were. You're waiting there till he dismounts and straight into jail. So what you're dealing with then is taking the movement to Jerusalem. Now, if that didn't happen, we have no idea if all of this could have died out. Would it have got to Paul? Maybe it would. I don't know. But so, everything that happened to Jesus is the warning, of course, that we are using of all the people who got themselves killed for nonviolent resistance, but died for it. So that's the heart, that historical experience is the heart then in which Michael, because the book was, I wrote 3 chapters, Galilee, Jerusalem, resurrection, keep it simple. Michael took those and enveloped them, did it marvelously, because it's very hard to tell where I'm writing and he's writing. It's not that this is me, this is him. Nah, he enveloped this with all the other examples of people going through the same thing, trying to get started, running into opposition, being assassinated, many cases, especially in South America, in liberation theology. So that brought us then to the resurrection as the third part of the book. And the resurrection for us, let me be very clear, is a metaphor. The execution is not a metaphor. You can metaphorize it, if you will, by how you interpret it. But no, if you were there with a camera, as it were, you would have seen it. Yes, you would. That wouldn't have told you what it meant. No, you could have, a Roman soldier could have said, good day for us, another bum out of the way. You know, you don't interpret it, but it's a fact. Now, resurrection is a metaphor. And here's what's important for us. Metaphors create reality.
Right.
If I want to know how metaphors create reality, I just watch the news. Right, I watch President Trump creating reality. Well, they're mostly from a lie rather than a metaphor, but let's say a metaphor. And if you want to know how it works, you look at the 30s when Hitler had his metaphor, the Third Reich, and Roosevelt had his metaphor, the New Deal. And people start living them, and yet they create reality. And it may be a terrible disaster, or it may be a relative success, but your alternative is another metaphor. So I would insist that resurrection is a metaphor. And now what we have to talk about is, what does it mean? What metaphors mean. If I were to say to you that somebody is a chicken, that's a metaphor. If you thought it was unfair, you would say, well, no, I don't think so. I think he's an eagle, or a peacock, or a vulture. They're all metaphors, but they're not
a jackass.
Or a jackass. The words that we want to say in public. But they're all metaphors, and they mean, and some of them get you killed if you say it in the wrong place at the wrong time. Yeah. So the biggest part then of the third thing was we were looking at the difference between the metaphor of resurrection in the West, where Jesus arises from the tomb, glorious, magnificent, but alone. And in the East, that's Eastern Christianity, where Jesus comes out with Adam and Eve, each by the hand. He comes out with the whole human race. Because Adam and Eve ain't just two nice people, a nice couple from the Old Testament. They're the human race. And I don't even know how to imagine that, literally. I can imagine Jesus rising from the tomb, literally. Imagine it. I don't know if I believe it. But there's no way you can imagine Jesus taking the human race out. Adam and Eve. So the whole question we had to ask ourselves at the end, how does this conquer death? Okay, it's a metaphor for the conquering of death. It's not all over with Jesus. He has conquered death. How does that work? Well, if I start believing that if I act like Jesus and I die, somehow or other, in ways I may not know, it will not have been meaningless. It is worth the risk. Then if I shift over to the East, how does the whole human race get out of death? It certainly doesn't mean that you and I and all the others are going to not die. Of course we're going to die. But how does the whole human race survive death? I can answer that today in a way that Jesus or Paul could never even have imagined. Are we a sustainable species? Are we, through the escalation of violence against ourselves, against other species, and against the world, sustainable? It's just an ordinary question. What will save the human race from extinction? Even if we got rid of war right now, totally got it out, we have two other ways coming at us already. Mm-hmm. One is population, and the other is pollution, if you will, or whatever. I mean, it's scary because you want to say, where's the sin? If we make the world uninhabitable, who sinned? I mean, the Bible talks about putting an end to war. That made a lot of sense because that was the worst thing they could imagine. They could never have dreamt. And we have AI coming at us now, even before we're solving the other ones. We don't know whether AI, if it gets going, and it's very smart, really, will figure the first thing it should do is get rid of us. It may. So what we're asking in the next one is, how does the metaphor of resurrection, be it individual or universal, west or east, how does that work? Work to change reality. Not often the future. How does it work? So that's really the questions we're asking in the third part between us. That's like a fast run through the book.
That's awesome. No, and you've left plenty of meat on the bone for people when they read this. That might be one of the more controversial things that you have affirmed over the years, though, is the resurrection as metaphor.
Yes, it is.
That pisses some folks off.
And I were really going to challenge them because between 2000 and 2015, Sarah and I, very often with the Borgs, very often by herself, were all over Europe, East and West. And in church after church after church, and museum after museum in the East, we saw this image of the resurrection. It says, hey, anastasis in Greek on it. So yeah, it's the resurrection. And Jesus is coming out with Adam and Eve, wrenching them out of their sepulchres. And they're coming out of the sepulchres. So they're not having a party. And you have to ask yourself, what does that mean? Now, don't ask do you believe it or not. What does it mean? In the same way that you and I can look at the golden arches, we know what it means. It means McDonald's. It's nothing to do with whether you like it, don't like it. You know it. So you can know what something means. So what does the East mean? It can't be literal. I've heard colleagues who talked about if you had a camera, you could see the resurrection, but they were talking about the Western resurrection, Jesus coming out. Tell me how you could have a camera in the first century and see Adam and Eve coming out with Jesus, when we know Adam and Eve represent the human race. It is a metaphor, but it creates reality. This is what somebody drives me crazy with. Well, it's just a mere metaphor. You live by metaphor. Will you go to Washington and look at it? We have a giant metaphor of constitutional, I'm going to say, anarchy, baby. Constitutional, not anarchy, but constitutional autocracy.
Yeah.
That's different. We never had constitutional autocracy before. That nothing surprises you anymore. Nothing. It's just the news for a few minutes. So that's a metaphor. That's a way of seeing. The way President Trump sees the world and everything else in it is a giant metaphor. It is a horrible metaphor. It's a destructive metaphor. And I won't draw any parallels because it's unique. It's a constitutional autocracy, totalitarianism, whatever you want. He's not above the law. He is the law. If you're above the law, that means you're different from the law. He is the law. So
it's terrifying.
When I say this is a metaphor, it's a way of imagining the future. It's a way, if we lived out this, if we were certain that, for example, it's the non-violent Jesus, because what you notice in this Eastern images, he always has the wounds are still in his hand and he's carrying the cross. It's awkward as heck, He's trying to give a hand to Adam and Eve, and he's carrying a cross kind of tucked under his arm. Or he's got an angel there, for transportation. Because of course, it's a non-violent Jesus who is going to save the world. You can't leave the cross aside and say, well, he had a horrible day on Friday, but it's all over now. So, it's a good deal. Bad day on Friday, great day on Sunday. Most Mediterranean males would settle for that. No. He carries the cross, awkward as it is. Not a great big wooden cross, but a bloody cross. What's going to save the human race? Now, I'm not talking religiously. I'm not talking in church. I'm talking about saving the human race. What's going to make us a sustainable species on a sustainable world? That's what I'm talking about. What metaphors, what visions are powerful enough to bring us together as a force to be recognized. That's what we're trying to do in this book.
And a positive force, if we can do it that way.
Yeah,
we've seen the other side, right?
Yeah, I mean, the cracks there about the president, but what we're really interested in is a positive alternative, not a negative attack, really.
Yeah. No, and I didn't take it that way at all.
No.
I agree with you 100%, but I love the idea, and you're 100% right. I mean, metaphors are most of the time all we have to describe things that are ineffable or whatever. And I think probably the largest mistake the Western Evangelical Church did was take all of that and concretize it and make it into literal something that and also made it something to which you had to adhere or believe.
Yes.
Or you weren't a real Christian. And so
what I found is a lot of friends of mine rejected that. How would I put this? Some people, everyone took it, some loved it, and some hated it, but everyone.
Yeah.
I found people saying, I just can't stand this resurrection stuff. Well, you've just pulled the rug out from under yourself. Or I can't stand this crucifixion stuff. Well, you shouldn't stand
that's kind of the point.
That's the point. It's an execution. Where are your capital punishment? It's a state execution guaranteed to terrify you. It's state terrorism in blunt language.
Yeah.
They could kill Jesus faster in lots of other ways. Garrote him in the garage and toss him over the wall.
Sure.
The whole program, they have to have paid killers who have to be able to beat him within an inch of his life, but not kill him, because he has to be able to stumble without resistance all the way to the cross. They want him alive when he's crucified. You can't have a big brawny guy who's going to fight them all the way to the cross. That's bad publicity. So you beat the guy just so much. These are trained executions. They're not just a couple of soldiers that be told to do it. So it's a business. You don't do it unless you want to make an example.
Do you think then, I've often wondered how Paul experienced Jesus on the road to Damascus. I don't certainly think he experienced Jesus physically. Do you think that was I'm not even sure I would call it a metaphor, but did he just have some sort of mystical experience where he conked his head and had a vision? I don't know.
I think, honestly, I spent a lot of time. I'm going to refer you to the book, Paul the Pharisee.
Yeah, I love that book.
In writing that book, I took a year off while I was helped by 2020. We all took a year off. All of a sudden, I had nothing to do. And I was thinking about the book. And so I said, okay, I'm going to leave Paul aside. I'm going to spend a year on Luke. I'm going to try and get Luke straight on Paul. But by doing it, I'm not going to just talk about Paul, give it to Luke. Oh, like this, don't like that, take this, dump that. I'm going to try and find out what makes Luke tick. And what makes him tick, by the way, is he's the first step towards Constantine. This is Luke's manifesto. You can be a good Roman and a good Christian.
Wow. Okay.
So, for example, Peter is going to be much more important than Paul. We say, wait a minute, but Paul gets 3 stories about his conversion. So does Luke. So does Peter, I mean. In chapter 10, Peter is the first one who decides that you go to the Gentiles and goes to the Gentiles. In chapter 11, he tells the story in Jerusalem, and in chapter 15, he tells it again. Read Luke Acts and just watch how the ascendancy of Peter's all right. Peter's not dangerous. Paul is dangerous. Paul is dangerous. So you have to, so in other words, when I come to the road to Damascus, I read the story. He insisted, Paul does, that he saw the Lord. But you can't see it when you're blinded with light.
Right.
What Luke does is take away from Paul the one thing for which Paul will live and die. I have seen the Lord, quote unquote. And therefore I'm just as important, Peter, James, as you guys. Yeah, you saw the Lord in the flesh and in the spirit. I admit I didn't see him in the flesh. I'm a little bit embarrassed by that, but that's not important. I have seen him as you have in the spirit. Therefore, I'm an apostle. If I'm flat on the road, blinded, and have to be guided into baptized, then I see. Oh, it's a lovely metaphor. You only see when you're baptized. Before that, you're blind. But it is not Paul, and it wipes out Paul. So the road to Damascus is not just a sort of a dramatization of a vision. I give that to Luke. That's all it was. Sure, that's just poetic license. It's a much better story. He's on the road from A to B, and in the middle of the road, he converts. It's a lovely, powerful metaphor. Geographical transition, theological transition. Gorgeous. Every artist who ever was wants to draw a picture of it. All Paul says, it was God was revealed. Jesus was revealed to me by God. He does not say it was a vision. It may have been.
Yeah.
It may have been. But it was the realization that this guy, Jesus, whom he was persecuting people for, was the Messiah Christ. That's a revelation. That's a breakthrough. You experienced, you said yourself, and you finally began to realize this is not the way it is.
Yeah, sure.
It doesn't have to be an ecstatic moment. It could be for some people.
Yeah.
It could be.
I never had that ecstatic experience. I was always a little envious of those who said they did. But
my good friend Marcus always talked to me, and that he had ecstatic experiences where he felt one with the world. I never argued against him because, of course, I knew it. He did. But I said, but Marcus, whether you had an ecstatic experience of being one with the world, you are one with the world. It's called evolution. So you're having an ecstatic experience of what's already given.
Mm.
You are one with the world, whether we like it or not, and that's part of our problem. We don't like it.
Yeah.
So if Paul had an ecstatic experience, that's lovely. But he does make an issue of it, and in fact, kind of tries to cool the Corinthians down from too much love of ecstatic experience. Proving you got it. You got it.
Yeah.
It seems like such an interesting place where maybe the East and West part ways a bit, because as a Christian growing up in the West, Paul was more important to us than Jesus. And just the truth of it was, I could quote way more scriptures from Paul. We never talked about the Sermon on the Mount. And Peter was almost an afterthought who opposed Paul. But I wonder if that has created for us some unique problems.
Oh, it does, really. And I was saved from those, not because I'm particularly inspired, but I grew up in Ireland.
Yeah.
And to be quite frank with you, I don't think we were that interested in Jesus versus Paul. It was the church.
Yeah,
we were reading the Bible. We were reading the Missal.
Yeah.
The Catholic Missal is the Bible retooled to be Catholic.
Yeah.
It's filled with the Psalms. As a priest, every day we prayed the Psalms and readings, Paul and everyone else, but it was packaged.
Yeah.
In the Bible. It was packaged as the Missal. And when I was an altar boy, the big book I carried, and it was a big book, believe me, it was 8 years of age, was the Missal. Now you say, what's in the Missal? Well, there's lives of the saints, there's the Psalms, there's reading from the Old Testament. You say, well, that's the Missal. Well, no, you see, because we took it and arranged it for every day of the year, so it was ours. It was a little bit polemical, but it has much the same. So when I decided I wanted to do history, Jesus was just the obvious one.
Yeah, for sure.
Nobody had told me I should choose Paul. If I had been properly schooled over here, but I got my doctorate in Ireland, spent 2 years in Rome at the Biblical Institute on exegesis, 2 years in the École Biblique in Jerusalem on archaeology. And it was only kind of when I began living here, or even with the Jesus seminar, to be honest with you, I began to realize there's a different ascendancy here. I'm not against it at all. Just, I don't have it.
Yeah.
I'm not trapped in it. I'm open to it. So I had no trouble, for example, reading Luke, pretty much clarifying, I think I know what Luke is up to. I think I know what he's doing. It makes sense to me. He's making a story that counters the Roman story of us. Okay, I got that. Now, Paul is part of Luke's story. Okay, I got that too. So I'm going to read Galatians and take it as normative over against Acts 15, because Acts 15 is a cleanup job. Paul doesn't get to speak in Acts 15. Peter gets to speak. And Peter's quote. And Peter's the one who says, as you know, God chose me. Oops. You hear Paul screaming all the way from Pisidian Antioch. You know, it's, in a way, it's kind of respecting what people are up to. All right? If I was writing at the beginning of the 2nd century, when Rome has its story, there was this guy over there who started a movement and we crucified him, and doggone it, the guys are still around. And my people are afraid of Rome. I'm going to tell them, let me tell you the story that you don't have to be scared of Rome. You can be a good Roman and a good Christian. But here's what you have to do. Cool it on Paul. Peter is more important than Paul. You know, if you read the story and kind of don't read Luke by himself than Paul by himself, then you can say, okay, for example, at the end of the life of Jesus, soldier beneath the cross. You mentioned Herod Antipas and the procurator. So all three levels of Roman power declared him innocent. Oh, that's lovely. The soldier, the military, the client kings, and the government. Come to the end of Paul, still in Jerusalem. The tribune, Claudius Lysias, writes a letter. Wow, we've escalated. Exculpation. And the king, Herod Agrippa, says he's innocent. And of course, Felix and Festus. Wow, when I finished reading these poor guys, Jesus and Paul, I see it's the jealousy of the Jews. It's those bad Jews who did it, not us good Romans. It's okay. You have to read it very, very careful. Yeah. What Luke acts about the Jews. Because Paul will tell you that I escaped from Damascus because the Nabateans were guarding the gates to arrest me. Absolute historical sense. And Luke Acts tells you the Jews were guarding the gates to kill me. Absolute historical nonsense. Jews in the first century did not guard the gates of Arabs. They really didn't. Rome had a monopoly on killing people.
Wow.
They might do it for you.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure they weren't heartbroken by it. But, man, there's so much. Gosh darn it. Dom, that's amazing. Yeah, because so much of how we were, again, indoctrinated into the church in the West was, I don't know, it was a soft sort of anti-Semitism, but it was there because they were always the bad people in the story. And the Romans, Pontius Pilate gets to wash his hands and, and say, well, we're only doing this because you guys forced our hand as the Romans hand gets forced by a bunch. Come on.
Yeah, Mark is actually doing is mocking Pilate because this great model of Roman law and order is shouted down by the mob. And the one thing that Rome vaunted itself was, we have brought you savages, law and order. Like the British Empire said to the Irish, you savages, we brought you law and order. Yeah. Now, here you have a procurator, and we know a lot about good old Pilate from Philo and he was pitched out by Vitellius, by the legate eventually. So he wasn't this dreamy Hamlet-like figure of, I really would like to let him off, but there's such a crowd and they're making so much noise. I got to give in. It really is a marvelous caricature of the Romans.
Right.
And it's a caricature, of course, of the high priesthood because they're jealous. That's what it said. So if I was a Roman, I'd be as insulted as if I was a high priest. It's like a two-head hatchet job. So it takes out the two authorities. But when you try and understand the history, as best you can reconstruct it, and it's not mysterious. You're not trying to read mind. You just read everything you can about the time. Look at all the sites. 2 years I was in Jerusalem. I went over there feeling like Alexander the Great. I'm going to get everywhere. not killing people, but like Christmas. I was at the French School of Archaeology. Christmas, Easter, summer. I have 3 Christmas, Easter, summer. I plotted it out. Lebanon and Syria. Egypt this time. Where else? Greece and Turkey. I slotted it all in. Iran and Iraq. I was all over Iran and Iraq. This is in the 60s, 1960s, 66. You could go anywhere. No problem. I was carrying an Irish passport still at the time. But still, even if I had an American passport, wouldn't have made any difference. You could go anywhere. You could get in a cab and take you, anywhere and not be afraid you'd be dropped down a hole somewhere and never found again. You could travel anywhere. So when you get all of that, you get a sense for the history. You don't let on you don't let on you can live in the first century. That's rubbish. But you can know when you're really talking rubbish about it. No, that wouldn't work. That wouldn't work.
For sure.
Jesus and justice, or for the reign of God then and now. And actually, it's been out since we published it ourselves to Amazon ourselves, and it's going to be taken up by Orbis Books.
Oh, okay.
In the next year, put out again. I don't know if they have to redo it or can use our files. And then we're doing a second, like a parallel volume called Jesus and Nonviolent Resistance. And that's a terribly important title because Jesus was not simply nonviolent. The Romans did not crucify you for nonviolence. They gave you methods. Nonviolent resistance was what got you crucified. That was called disturbing the peace, as far as the Romans were concerned. Disturbing people. So the fact actually that Jesus was crucified, but his closest followers weren't rounded up, would, to me, knowing the Romans, by civil law, they considered him the leader of a nonviolent group. That's what they did with it. You crucify the leader, and that'll take care of them. They're not worth crucifying. You don't waste 12 crosses, 12 squads of trained execution. No. You take care of the leader, and if you guys are still at it 5 years from now, we take off for your next leader until you get the message. So Pilate alone tells me a lot about Jesus, honestly. Now, I'm not going to say I would have known it for sure, but knowing what I know, I can see, Pilate made the right judgment. From his point of view, Jesus is the nonviolent leader of a nonviolent movement, and we don't like that, so we crucify the leader. Then we get the message.
Thank you so much for hanging out with us and discussing the book. It sounds, I just wish you the best of success in all of it, and we'd love to catch up with you sometime, see how things are going.
The two of us always come on together for our joint books. Anytime you want me just for myself, I'd be very glad to come.
Thank you for listening to This Is Not Church. Be sure to rate and review the podcast on your platform of choice. If you would like to partner with us, visit patreon.com/thisisnotchurch, where you will receive exclusive content such as early access to episodes, videos of upcoming episodes, and live Q&A sessions. Be sure to check out our Facebook group or follow us on Twitter and Instagram. All the links are in the show notes. We'll be back soon with another episode.